second full-length documentary. That's my self-intro. So go ahead, give us your version, Dr. Bill.
My name is William M. Pollack. I'm a junior. My father was William M. Pollack, and he's the one that introduced me to the Gonstead system. He was a dairy farmer and had developed scar tissue on his chest called keloids, and he'd gone to the Mayo Clinic after having gone to all the local doctors and gotten no results, and Mayo Clinic finally told him, there's nothing we can do for you. If we cut these off, they'll grow back twice as big and they'll be twice as painful. So on the way back from Rochester, Minnesota to Wilmington, Illinois, my grandfather said, why don't we stop in Mount Horeb? I saw this old chiropractor there back in the 30s when he was no old chiropractor, he was a young guy. And he fixed a problem I had with a rib, and maybe he can take care of you too. Well, at that time, Gonstead was no longer in the little office downtown or in his clinic that he'd built downtown. He was now in this big clinic on top of the hill in Mount Horeb. So Gonstead checked him out, and he says, well, this is a pinched nerve between your shoulders. He said, I'm going to fix that. 5 adjustments later, the pain that my dad had suffered with for 20 or 30 years was completely gone, and it never came back. So he got the idea that chiropractic was really good at taking care of pain in the keloids. Well, my grandfather had polycystic disease of the kidneys and should have died by the time he was 50, and Gonstead kept him alive until he was 80. My brother vomited after every single meal, and he came up here and got adjusted by Dr. Doug Cox. One visit, and he was completely cured. He never puked again after his meals unless he'd had too much adult beverage when he got older. And then the last time I wet the bed, I was a freshman in high school, and I had asthma, and Dr. Gonstead told me he was going to fix both of those, and I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon, so I was pretty sure he was, talking quackery. And he adjusted me and completely fixed the bedwetting problem, and he fixed my asthma as well. So I knew that chiropractic took care of polycystic disease of the kidneys, took care of keloids, took care of vomiting after meal, and took care of asthma and bedwetting. I didn't know that chiropractic was for backaches and stiff necks until I got to chiropractic college, because none of my family had ever gone to a chiropractor for anything other than problems aside from backaches and stiff necks. So that was rare. So in 1972, I was in high school, and Dr. Gonstead asked me, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon. He said, the hell you are, you're going to be a chiropractor and a damn good one. So he told me no matter how difficult it is, you go to Palmer College of Chiropractic and become a chiropractor.
When you said problems, could you kind of go ahead and unpack that? Problems.
Yeah. Well, none of them were backaches or stiff necks. They were all diseases. My mother had pathologically high blood pressure and had very degenerated knees. We prevented her knee replacement surgery for 25 years after they told her she had to have it done. My dad had these keloids. He also had a problem with severe ulcers. He used to buy Maalox by the case, 12 bottles of Maalox at a time. And Gonstead fixed that almost immediately. We had friends, 80% of Gonstead's practice came from more than 50 miles away. So we had friends that were from this small town 200 miles south of here that came up to the Gonstead clinic to get taken care of. And one of them was a diabetic and got his diabetes taken care of up here. My ex-wife had epilepsy and got that taken care of here. Another friend of ours had migraine headaches and got that taken care of here. So chiropractic was for problems. It wasn't for backaches and stiff necks. And like I said, until I got in chiropractic college, I didn't know that anybody even thought that chiropractic was for anything other than some kind of a physical problem or a metabolic problem or some kind of a disease process, because those were the things that I saw taken care of.
Two things. First, what technically, in particular for you, asthma, right? What happened in your body, the physiological part, that fixed? Is that, go for it. You can turn that off. Yeah. What happened in your body? Explain. And I'm not a doctor. I need to explain to everybody. I'm not a doctor, so explain to me. I am representing the lay public. What happened in your body that fixed asthma?
Okay, so in I grew up from the time I was 5 years old until I came to the Gonstead Clinic at 16 years old. I had suffered severe asthma, and I grew up on a dairy farm. So, there's lots of dust and hay and corn and all that sort of thing, all of which I was allergic to, and all of which would cause severe respiratory problems, where there were times that I had to crawl across the yard to get to my medication to open my lungs up so that I was able to breathe. And once Dr. Gonstead started to adjust me, he found a problem in my pelvis that needed to be taken care of, and he found a problem between my shoulders that needed to be taken care of. And by so doing, it got to the point where I was no longer needing the medication. I wasn't having any more asthma attacks. And I don't know if you can imagine, in the summertime when hay is being baled, it's normally hotter than today, 90, 95 degrees, and very sunny. And so the barn where the hay is stored would be, the barn was about 40 or 50 feet tall, and in the top of that, where the sun was beating down on it, would be very hot. So it might be 90 or 95 degrees outside, but in the top of that barn, it might be 110, 115 degrees. There's also no ventilation in there because you don't want a lot of air going through that top portion of the barn. So it was very, very hot, very, very humid, and not much good quality air. Now you add to that the fact that all this hay that was being put up there was dry, so it was full of dust. And I'd use the expression that the dust was so thick that if you held your arm out to the end of your hand out to the end of your arm, you'd think your hand was amputated because you couldn't see that far. The dust was so thick. It really wasn't that bad, but it just seemed like it. And I worked up there all day and had no asthma attack after I'd been taken care of by Dr. Gonstead.
And then the second part was why. Because when I hear your personal story of how you got into it and your family, a lot of friends got into, let's say, fixing the problems, and then you figured out at the tail end, I didn't think, or not figured out, and at the tail end of that is, I didn't think it was for sore necks and sore backs, back pains and stuff. Why is there, in the public eye, why does chiropractic care equal helping my sore back and my neck?
Well, that's pretty simple. It's because, initially when I was first in chiropractic 44 years ago, chiropractors would say, medical doctors would say, "You're going to a chiropractor? You out of your mind? You realize they get their license from a Cracker Jack box?" But then they said, "Oh, chiropractic is really, really good for backaches and stiff necks, but in your case it won't work," because they found out that if the doctor was protesting too much, it meant that it probably worked, and there was a reason for it. So that the physician would lose that patient because he would go to a chiropractor and get fixed. Okay, so then the medical profession tried to pigeonhole chiropractors into backs and necks. Okay, and then they found out that we were so good at fixing things that were related to the neck, like pain in the arm and carpal tunnel syndrome and migraine headaches, that they better stop that. So then they started trying to tell people that chiropractic caused strokes, and the amount of strokes that were caused by manipulation of the neck is so minuscule that it's hardly worth talking about. In fact, most of the strokes that were caused by manipulation of the neck were done by medical doctors or by physical therapists had absolutely no training whatsoever on how to do adjustments of the neck. But chiropractic for the person, manipulation of the neck done by a chiropractor is exceedingly safe. My understanding is that Canada, where they keep the best record, said your chances of an adverse effect are about 1 in 30 or 40 million. So your chances are much better of having a stroke, having a bowel movement, than getting a chiropractic adjustment.
So a couple of things. Give me a time frame for when you're saying, let's say medical profession, or what did you say, physicians? Or first of all, who was the enemy of chiropractic? Who, in your eyes, and you can give me timelines. Like in 1950, it was in 1970.
No, it's always been the same. Initially, chiropractors were ignored by the medical profession, and then they were ridiculed by the medical profession, and then they tried to absorb chiropractic. There was a 10-year plan that they had. I don't remember the name of the plan. I did have it at one time. And it was about 30 years ago, and I don't remember too much, specifics from 30 years ago. But it was a 10-year plan, and they were well into it. And the first thing that they wanted to do was make sure that chiropractors understood that the only thing that they were able to take care of was backaches and stiff necks. They also wanted to add the use of pharmaceuticals to chiropractic. And there's a lot of incompetent chiropractors in the world who it'd be much easier for them to take care of somebody that's in pain by giving them a prescription drug. So there were a lot of chiropractors that tried to get that legalized. I'm very much opposed to that because, chiropractic has always been about fixing problems by finding exactly what's wrong and correcting it, not trying to cover up the symptoms of it, and that the symptoms are what are taken care of medically. So the medical profession started to then do everything they could to attack chiropractic. I remember when I was a kid, I was in a medical doctor's office, and there was a book in the medical doctor's office that was called At Your Own Risk. And it was a book that was written by a guy by the name of Ralph Lee Smith. And it was all about the chiropractic quackery and how, chiropractors failed to diagnose cancer of the eyeball, and the chiropractors didn't really go to school and had no training and, diagnostics and pathology and all that sort of thing, all of which was false. But nevertheless, if you say a lie often enough, what ends up happening is that people start to eventually believe it.
So what kind of, here we are in 2021 with a few hundred people from all over the country here to learn about Gonstead chiropractic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But 10 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, 40, 50, when Dr. Gonstead was learning, a lot has happened to get to where we are today. And who would you say is, for lack of a better term, the enemy? Like, is it still the medical profession, as you say, today?
No, it's political medicine that's the enemy. I have no problem with most physicians. Most physicians are interested in taking care of the patients, so it's not a problem. But historically in the 70s, the American Medical Association had a program called the Program to Contain and Eliminate Chiropractic, and a person who was in the American Medical Association had infiltrated them and found that they had this program. And they sent documentation to a chiropractor in Chicago by the name of Chester Wilk. And it became the famous Wilk case back in the 70s. And Judge Gatzendanner, who was in the district court in United States District Court in Chicago, found them guilty over an 11-year period of time of an illegal conspiracy to try to contain and eliminate chiropractic. So the American Medical Association then appealed it to the appellate court. I believe it was in Florida, was that appellate court, where they tried to appeal it, and the appellate court upheld the finding of the lower court, and then they tried to appeal it to the Supreme Court, during which time they tried to change the definition of antitrust not to include medical care. Okay, so they're antitrust. They've been guilty of antitrust, trying to get rid of competition for years. I mean, they had testimony that said it's better to let a patient die than to cooperate with a chiropractor in treating the patient. Chiropractors are stealing the food from the mouths of the young practitioners who should rightfully have access to those patients. We must at all costs prevent chiropractors from getting on the staff of hospitals, because it will elevate them to our status. So, the enemy has always been political medicine. It's not anybody else, just political medicine.
And who's the benefactors of this political medicine?
The American Medical Association.
How so?
Even the doctors dropped the American Medical Association like flies. They had to send out their illegal conspiracy information to every medical doctor in the country, and they lost membership. They lost tremendous membership. So the reality is that the American Medical Association is basically a has-been organization, has nothing whatsoever to do with patient care or interest in patient care. They're solely interested in making more and more money for physicians.
Through the sale of pharmaceuticals?
Through the use of pharmaceuticals, right.
And so what is, in your opinion, or maybe it's not opinion, maybe it's fact, the relationship between, or actually no, this is for you, Dr. Bill. How do you explain to me the relationship between medicine and chiropractic care?
Well, there's two basic differences in philosophy. One is that chiropractors are looking for the cause of illness and removing it or correcting it. And medical doctors are interested in what kind of symptomatology you have. So if you go to a medical doctor and you're healthy, he checks you out and say, oh, nothing's wrong, come again next year. You go back the next year and he checks you out and says, oh, nothing's wrong, come again next year. You go back the next year and he goes, oh, something's wrong, well, let's treat it. So then you become a patient. Okay, up until that time, you're just somebody that gets examined. But when they find something wrong with you, they're going to treat it. You know, there was a great book written by Dr. Robert Mendelsohn, who was a medical doctor, pediatrician in Chicago, called The Medical Heretic. And he said that when you're walking down the street and you see a medical doctor coming towards you, cross to the other side of the street, because if he stops and talks to you, he'll want to diagnose you. And if he diagnoses you, he'll want to treat you. So it's better to stay away from them. Well, you know, he wasn't very popular in the medical profession. He was obviously very popular with the chiropractors. And when he spoke to medical schools, the young students or the young graduates would come and talk to him and say, you know, you're right. What can we do to treat patients better? And he said, go to work for a chiropractor and you'll learn how to treat patients.
Have you debated people over this?
Of course.
I can tell. I'm like, okay, yeah, you taking your stance in front of people, and it's good that we have this part in this whole film, this documentary, this voice of, I don't want to say a fight, although it is sort of a conflict between, I would say, not just people in the overall health betterment, but then you get into physicians, you get into the chiropractors, and even in chiropractic care today, if I Google search it, all those search results that I go through might not be what you would consider. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't even go in that office. So there's a wide array of my options as someone who either needs care or is looking proactively to just be a better me, right? And for you, what do you kind of, I would say, maybe not debate mode, but dinner party, a few glasses of wine gone already, and chill mode, if you will. What's your kind of, I would say, like elevator pitch for choosing chiropractic care?
Well, first, I don't drink, so you know, so I'd be the one that would be like in complete control while everybody else was drunk. So what ends up happening is this: the person is sitting there, and they inevitably oh, you're a chiropractor? Oh my God, my back. And I go, yeah, well, you know, I do take care of backs, but that's not my specialty. You go, what's your specialty? I said, I really like sick people. He said, you like sick people? I said, yeah. He says, well, what kind of sick people? I says, I don't care. Somebody that's got migraines, epilepsy, diabetes, you know, cancer, ulcers, doesn't make any difference. Anything that's wrong with them, those are the kind of things I like to take care of. Really? And what sort of results do you get? I said, well, you're talking about like with migraine headaches as an example? Well, sure, yeah. What do you do with migraines? Well, in 44 years of taking care of migraine headache patients, I probably have seen upwards of 5,000. And out of that 5,000, I've had 3 or 4 that I was unable to fix. Now, that's not cover up the migraine. That's not get rid of the headache that they have right now, but get rid of the condition so that they no longer get migraine headaches. Not just so that that headache that they have at that time gets better. Like somebody has a headache, they take aspirin or the strong stuff that they give them for migraines, you know, even, Imitrex or any of the other drugs. They use Fiorinol or Cafragot or any of the drugs that they use to treat it. Tegretol, I think, is another one they use. Well, all those drugs treat the symptom of what they have at that time. So then they came up with this brilliant idea of injecting Botox, you know, into people's muscles to paralyze the muscles so that their muscles don't tighten up, because that's probably it. And most migraine patients will tell you, yeah, it seemed to make a little bit of difference. I seem to be a little bit better. I'm not interested in making somebody better. I'm interested in making them well. So by treating the condition, the problem that they actually have, they get well. They no longer have migraines. And they may go for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years and never have a single headache once we correct the problem. And because 30 million people in this country have a headache every single day of their life, there's a whole lot of people out there that need to have chiropractic.
What is the condition that causes migraine?
Subluxation. It's a vertebra out of position that either stretches, irritates, or pinches a nerve. The joint is always fixated. There's less motion in that joint. The medical profession even came up with their own definition of subluxation, which includes hypermobility or too much motion. Well, we invented it, so they're wrong.
Tell me, I mean, now I'm talking to you, Dr. Bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I was like, okay, Dr. Bill converted me, I'm going to start my journey. I want to be a chiropractor. What schools am I going to? Where do I have to learn? And I mean, I hear I'm at this clinic, right? But all these people are out here, Life College or university. What is my journey going to look like? And what are like red flags that you have for me as I go through that?
Well, first of all, I mean, I went to Palmer College of Chiropractic in Davenport. Chiropractic is the oldest and the biggest, and that's where, that's where I would suggest that you go. But if you weren't going to go to Palmer, I would definitely suggest that you go to Life. Philosophically based, Sherman College also does a pretty good job of philosophy, but as far as Life Chiropractic College goes and Palmer College of Chiropractic, that's where you're going to get the best all-around education regarding chiropractic. So those are definitely the schools that I would recommend.
Any red flags I should look out for?
Sure. If they, you see the clinic doctors come in wearing long lab coats with a stethoscope around their neck, it probably is not the most chiropractic conducive school.
What about not as I want to be a chiropractor, but I'm seeking chiropractic care? What red flags should I look out for?
Well, if you go to a chiropractor and he lays you on your back, well, first of all, let me say this, that the worst chiropractor in the world is better than the best medical doctor for a problem with your back or your neck, okay? The worst chiropractor is better than a medical doctor for your back or your neck. The medical results for back surgery, as an example, are pathetic. My wife is a surgical assistant. She has done over 600 back surgeries, and she always asks the physician, how's Joe after the surgery, or how's Mary after the surgery? And she says, the doctor always says, well, we traded one pain for another pain, because only 50% of people that get back surgery are better after the surgery, and after 5 years, only 5% are good, still good, so their results really are pathetic, okay? So what I would suggest when you go to a chiropractor, first of all, is that it be a Gonstead chiropractor. Make sure that they use some sort of instrumentation and they evaluate the spine. They move the spine around. They don't just crack everything that they can crack from top to bottom. They don't lay you on your back and twist your neck and twist your neck to the right and twist it to the left. The bone can only go out of position to the right or the left and then do other things, but it can't go out to the left and the right. So to crack it on both sides is totally a wrong type of procedure. A chiropractor that, it does a ton of physical therapy to try to quote unquote loosen you up before the adjustment has absolutely no idea what they're doing. They're either doing it monetarily or they're doing it because they're incompetent, but they're not doing it because it's a benefit to the patient.
Good red flags. Do you guys want to chime in with anything? Yeah.
Yes, I would love to. I'll stand over here. So I'm gonna take a step back because Dr. Gonstead was your chiropractor,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people went to a chiropractor, and then that's what made them want to go to chiropractic school.
Mm-hmm.
Were there certain things that Dr. Gonstead stressed upon you as these are the important things that when you become a chiropractor and you're serving patients, these are the things that you need to make sure you're doing?
Absolutely. First of all, he said always use a nervoscope. In fact, he told me to buy a nervoscope when I was, I believe, in the second quarter of Palmer. Actually, he told me to buy one immediately, but I couldn't buy it until the second quarter. So I bought a nervoscope immediately. He also told me to buy one of the good German spines. And he said study the spine every day and use that nervoscope on people every single day because you have to learn how to use those things to become a good chiropractor. But then as I got into school, he told me to be very, very specific. If you don't get it one way, that doesn't mean it's the wrong place. Once you're sure that you have the subluxation located exactly where it is, then you have to correct it. So there's multiple ways to be able to do that. But he said, don't give up on it. You have to do it. And he also said, don't hurt the patient. Don't adjust the patient in such a way as that it makes them afraid for you to do it in the future. So be accurate, be very specific. And when you're being very specific with the positioning of your hand on the patient and making the correction, you need to make sure that you're pushing it in the correct direction. So that's the purpose of the x-rays. And he said, always take full spine x-rays. The little spot shot x-rays, you can't compare one area to the other areas, so that needs to be on one sheet of film. I know with the new technology, the digital technology, they have the ability to stitch the films together so it looks like one spine, but you want to be able to compare each area of the spine to each other area of the spine. It's extremely important to do so. Wait, let me get rid of this. No, that's somebody set off an alarm in one of my houses. Great.
It's not a good sign.
We have rental houses, and I put it on do not disturb, and I'll put it on theater mode too. Maybe that'll get rid of everything. So now it shouldn't go off.
Can we finish that last part?
Yeah.
You were talking about what he told you to do. Right?
The entire spine.
Right.
The entire spine.
Right. Yeah. And then he said, when you're evaluating the patient, take as long as you need to do so, and use every reason not to adjust the patient. So after you've adjusted the patient and there's been a big change, we as chiropractors, we set them up on some sort of an appointment schedule, and they come in and we check them again, and we know that, they're supposed to be in 3 times this week, so they better get adjusted all 3 times. Well, that's not necessarily the case, because in a lot of cases, they don't need to be adjusted a bunch of times. They might only need to be adjusted once or twice. So in the evaluation process, you have to determine where the problem is, and then when you're rechecking the patient the next visit, make sure that if it's improved a great deal, you want to leave it alone, and that's one of the things that, they impressed on me that made a huge difference in my treatment of the patients. And then the other thing I think that was very important was the part where he said, take all the time you need, spend as much time on that patient determining what to do and where to do it that you need, and don't rush it.
What was your first impression when you first met Dr. Gonstead?
Well, first of all, I broke out in a cold sweat and I almost passed out, because I knew that, chiropractors were quacks, and, I was going to be probably paralyzed from the knee down, because I came here for a knee problem initially. And, so that was my first impression. Then I saw this guy, he kind of waddled in because he was all crippled up from the rheumatoid arthritis he had when he was a teenager. So my first impression was, this guy's scary. So after he checked the problem and he showed me the x-rays and he said, see here, this is where your problem is, and this is what I'm going to fix, then I really got scared. And he adjusted me and it didn't hurt at all, and I was better that afternoon. Like, they were going to do surgery on my knee. I didn't even talk about my knee before, but they were going to do surgery on my knee, and he adjusted my knee once. It was the end of my knee problem. And, so I never had knee surgery. And that was back in the days when Gail Sayers from the Chicago Bears had multiple knee surgeries, because the surgeries just are terrible. They don't put the bone in position, they just cut out the cartilage. And I would have had to go through that same crap. But fortunately, I was a dairy farm kid, and I was the oldest, so my dad said, I can't do without you, so you're going to go see Dr. Gonstead. So that's how I ended up here.
Any other kind of memories of this building?
Yeah. My first appointment with Dr. Gonstead was usually at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'd see him around 10, because he'd already be a couple hours behind by the time I'd get to see him. And then my last appointment with him would be at 10 o'clock at night, and they would call me and wake me up in the room at 1 o'clock in the morning and tell me to come up and get my second adjustment later on in the day. So yeah, my impression that this guy never gets to sleep. And he told me that when the high-low is going down, it takes 8 seconds to go from top to down and from down to up. And he sleeps during that 8 seconds with the table going down and the table going up. And actually, with as many hours as he worked, I believe that was the case. And as many patients as he saw, I think he must have been a way figured out efficiently. And he also worried about nothing. He had no concerns, no worries, no stresses, and when he was in a room with a patient, he actually created a new unit of time where the time that he was in the room, there was not another single person on the planet other than the patient that he was working on. So these were the things that impressed me the most. And every time I was out of school, I would follow him around and watch him take care of patients. And, it gave me a unique perspective in being able to take care of my patients.
Last one. Actually, it's two. Why was, with as much criticism, hate, attack, whatever you call it, opposition from the medical field that chiropractic care had during his time, why was he still so successful?
Well, because, if you've been to 15 doctors and you never got any better, and then you came to the Gonstead clinic and Dr. Gonstead fixed you in a week or two, and you went back home, you told everybody, you know, I've spent years trying to handle this problem, and Dr. Gonstead fixed it in a weekend. You know, people go, you got to be kidding me. Well, I've had migraines for my whole life. Well, go see Dr. Gonstead, and Gonstead would fix your migraines, and you'd go home, and for 6 months you didn't have a single headache. You'd say, I don't believe this. I've been treating with migraines for the last 20 years. They put me on a cocktail of 6 different drugs, and Dr. Gonstead took me off all that medication, and I haven't had a headache in 6 months. Pretty soon people start to get the idea that this really works. You know, when I told him I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon, and he said, the hell you are, you're going to be a chiropractor and a damn good one. He said, you go out in that reception room and you talk to people. So I talked to people in the reception room, and they were there for depression. They were there for multiple sclerosis. They were there for diabetes. They were there for cancer. They were there in a wheelchair with muscular dystrophy, and showed me that they hadn't been able to get out of the wheelchair for several years, and now they were able to stand up and walk on their own back to get their treatment. You know, so I saw this stuff going on, and people came from all over the world when I came here initially in 1970 to see Dr. Gonstead. And, you know, you'd see, you know, Mayo Clinic is much like that. You go to Mayo's and you see people from all over the world. Well, you did at the Gonstead Clinic as well, because people were referred here. It wasn't, he says, I never spent as much of as a postage stamp on advertising. People were his advertising. People would go home and tell people about the miracles that they got coming to the Gonstead Clinic. So the Gonstead system achieves results where nobody else does. You know, he told me the average chiropractor treats, 80% of the patients that they see get better, 10% get worse, and 10% don't get any better. And he said, if we take the 20% that they fail on, we'll still fix 95% of those because of the specificity of the Gonstead method. And I believe that to be the case because that's been my experience as well.
We'll end on this. Where do you personally, with someone like yourself who's got so much skin in the game, a defender, if you will, of your practice, where do you want to see this practice, Gonstead Chiropractic Care, in the future?
Well, the thing that excites me is that there are nearly 300 people at this seminar, and probably 200 of them are students. So the future of chiropractic is bright with so many students learning about the Gonstead method, because I believe it was B.J. Palmer that said, if chiropractic isn't specific, it's nothing. Okay, and the Gonstead method teaches specificity. So the most important thing is that these students are learning how to be specific to do the job right, to get the patient's problems corrected by finding out exactly what they have and going after it and getting that job done so that the patients actually get well without the use of needles, drugs, and surgery. Because without the needles, drugs, and surgery, medicine is nothing. So chiropractic has a tool that no one else has, and is by working with the body's own inherent recuperative abilities, by turning that power loose in the body can heal itself of almost anything. We just have to give it a chance to do so.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
That was so amazing.
That
was so good.
Dealing with a pro, guys.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've never